So writing has existed for the best part of 5,000 years. Started off for economic reasons. Economics really drove the invention of writing and literacy. But pretty soon, and especially and first of all in Sumerian literature, people are concerned with the great issues of life. Who are we? Why are we here? What is the point of it all? Especially in Mesopotamia, with the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, life is hard. It's unpredictable. The rivers require a lot of work to manage them. They burst their banks, they flood, they produce catastrophes. And to manage them and to have reliable crops and fertility and civilization, cities, you need strong government, you need bureaucracy. And with that comes a literary class that can start to produce texts that address these wide questions. And some of the questions are, we die. This is frightening. How do we deal with this? So, for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic which looks at the question of death and how we can deal with that, how we can try to come to terms with that. Gilgamesh begins at one point, he's trying to avoid it, he's trying to cheat it, he's trying to achieve immortality. And he tries to do this because this person, his best friend, Enkidu, has perished. And when somebody dies, it makes you think about your own mortality. Really, we read these myths almost like children. The first time a child comes across a bereavement, it starts to make them think. And you can read Gilgamesh in the same way. My friend has died. This is going to happen to me. How do I cope with this? Now, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he goes to seek out his very famous ancestor, Utnapishtim, who lives at the ends of the earth and survived the flood. And by surviving the flood, the gods made him immortal. And Gilgamesh wants to know how he can become immortal as well. The problem is he can't, because the flood was a once-only event. And so Gilgamesh really has to come to terms with the fact that one day he will die. So we have myths like that in ancient Mesopotamia, but we also have other stories. A very famous hymn to the god Marduk, the god of Babylon, called Enuma Elish, which is about how Marduk defeats the mother goddess Tiamat in cosmic conflict. And through this defeat of Tiamat, he creates the present age, the cosmos as we now know it. And then you end up with this wonderful hymn to Marduk, which goes on for columns and columns and columns in the original Akkadian texts. Now, this is again an account of how creation and how the world as we now know it exists and is maintained by Marduk, but it's not in any way comparable to what we have in the Bible. Because in the Bible, when we have a creation account, it is not a hymn to God. Or in the Bible, when we have the flood account, it's not an explanation for why we're all going to die. The purpose underlying the biblical accounts is entirely different and often explicitly and purposely contrary to the purpose of the Mesopotamian accounts. For example, in the Mesopotamian accounts, the flood is sent to try and wipe out humanity because humans have become too numerous. And the flood is the final solution, as it were. The gods have tried famine, and they tried disease, and they've tried all these other mechanisms to try and limit human numbers, and humans keep reproducing, and it's a problem. So the flood is sent to try and wipe them out completely. Now, in the Bible, the flood does not come to limit human numbers. The flood comes because humans are inherently evil, and there's a problem because of what they're doing. And after the flood, God says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, spread forth through it and replenish it. In other words, the priority of the God of the Bible is fertility and fruitfulness and people having babies. Whereas in the Mesopotamian accounts, it's the exact opposite. After the flood, they're like, well, let's create barren women. Let's create women who won't procreate. Let's create stillbirths and miscarriages as a means of limiting population. Whereas in Torah, God says to the children of Israel, these things will not be a plague upon you. So Torah is explicitly going against the prevailing attitude of the neighboring countries and saying, no, the flood was sent not for a selfish reason, but for a moral reason. And it's something which demonstrates the necessity of a covenant between God and between humans with laws that mean that God won't have to do this again. So the whole point of the narratives is different. It's to demonstrate how God relates to humans and how humans can maintain a right relationship with God.